we're live.
All right, welcome everybody. This is Mentionables Live. With me tonight, I have the Maverick Christian and Rebel Without a Clue, aka you would know him as the one and only Clinton Wilcox.
Yeah.
Welcome, gentlemen. Glad to have you with us tonight.
Glad to be here.
So tonight I've got something special planned for us for some rather random fun. We'll see what kind of interaction we get with this. And tonight we're going to take on some flawless atheist victories. So I think we're going to have some fun with this one because I'm not sure these are quite as flawless as people seem to think they are.
You mean people are wrong on the internet?
Yeah, just once in a while. I mean, it's pretty rare that anybody would be wrong on the internet, but once in a while. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen at least once in a while somebody be wrong on the internet.
On occasion.
Okay. Well, at least I'm not alone on that. All right. So, what's going on with you guys this week? Any announcements or anything we can take care of here at the front of the show?
Well, my next video will be in 4K. I have at last a 4K. And if you're a Patreon member on my Maverick Christian, you can get to see an unboxing video where I unbox this in the lens.
Very cool. Judging by how excited you seem over it, I bet that's a very enthusiastic video.
I try to keep it toned down. Because I'm a Minnesotan, I got to keep those emotions.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
You betcha.
That's the first time I've heard that come out.
Yeah, you betcha. Doing really good here in Minnesota, don't you know?
You know, I think you could really increase our viewership here and probably on your own channel if you just use that constantly. Like,
I've lived in Minnesota for over 30 years. I've never actually heard anybody talk like that.
Well, we're down here. I'm down here in the South, so you know how that goes too. We get made fun of for our accents all the time as well.
That's true. Down south.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, without further ado, I'm going to throw this up to let people know we can take their questions at any point. So if any viewers pop in and you've got a question or a comment, we love interacting with people. So I know I got the link up for this a little late tonight, but if you pop on and you have a question or a thought or a comment or whatever, please feel free to throw it in the chat. And we'll get to it. There's a slight time delay, so we won't see it for a few seconds at least until you're a few seconds behind us on the video anyway. I guess they do that in case we've got to all of a sudden bleep something out or whatever. But we've got a few seconds between when we say it and when you see it. So anyway, we will get to chat when we get a chance to. And tonight, let me go ahead and get this ready. This has got one of our favorite people's face on this video, so it's got to be good. I can tell you that right off the bat. Hopefully the audio will come through loud and clear. So anything with Richard Dawkins' face on it, you kind of know right away that that's going to be a real win. So, just for our listeners as well, Joel may be joining us tonight. I don't know. We may have some more surprise guests pop in. But for Mentionables announcements this week, we're going to try something a little different. Next weekend, we will be going on at 11 p.m. Eastern Time next Sunday, the 28th. And we're going to be doing Mentionables Apologetic Theater. And we're going to be looking at the modern sci-fi classic, Arrival. Not to be confused with The Arrival from back in the 90s, but this is Arrival, the 2016 film. So we're going to take a look at it from both a individual perspective, and we're going to see what kind of apologetic value this flick may have as well. So it's not going to be one you're going to want to miss. It should be fun. We'll be live. So again, we'll be able to interact with viewers if you tune in around 11 p.m. next Sunday. If not, feel free to check it out after. It will be on YouTube. And while I'm talking about it, be sure to, if you like this kind of live content, we try and go live at least weekly. So you're going to see different stuff, whether we're responding to atheist videos, giving reasons people leave Christianity, talking about deconversion, or maybe just reviewing movies that have apologetic value, or music for that matter. We've done all kinds of stuff like that. So tell us what you like. We'll try and keep the content coming, especially if you guys enjoy it. So
yeah, as a musician myself, I feel kind of uniquely qualified to talk about music rather than movies, even though I do enjoy movies too. But yeah, I can get more in the nitty gritty of music when we go that route.
Yeah, you certainly take the level of conversation with music like right over my head because I don't have a musical bone in my body. So I love music, but I've tried playing some instruments before, and it's just not for me.
Yeah, well, this lockdown has got me going crazy because I like to be out, jamming with some other musicians, but hasn't been possible because of the quarantine.
Yeah, that's made a lot of things difficult. So it's actually taken my other apologetics supergroup, if you will, from meeting locally. We used to meet locally, and now we're doing stuff online on YouTube and Facebook as well. So while you hit subscribe to the Mentionables, also go check out Question Christianity. So we're starting to get some content out there, and we essentially hold a live meeting online every week. So, all right, guys. Well, that's got through about all the announcements I can handle for one night. So let's get into some fun with this video. If there are any sound issues, let me know. I think I've got all our issues fixed. Previously, we had some slowdown with videos too. I think I've eliminated that. So we're going to dive into these 7 clever atheist flawless victories.
Now, is flawless victory being used here ironically, or does the video maker actually believe these are flawless victories?
Well, let's check out the description to make sure. Well, they list religion, atheism, and science. Our favorite atheists engage in intellectual mortal combat in these insightful moments on religion, faith. Finish him. Flawless victory.
Poe's law may be at work.
Yeah.
So this
okay, yeah, we could do Mortal Kombat as long as I get to play as Raiden.
I'll take Scorpion any day. So
I was a fan of Sub-Zero myself.
Yeah, Sub-Zero's my second choice.
I'm trying to retool all the Mentionables debates from now on. Any of the debates that go up, and I'm going back and retooling a lot of our thumbnails. I'm trying to design them all to look like fight screens. So everybody has health bars and that sort of thing. So
okay, there we go.
Yeah. So so we've definitely got some inspiration on that side.
Yeah, well, there's that internet meme that Guile's music goes with everything. So maybe start playing Guile's music in the background of some of the debates.
That's a good idea. I like that. I'm going to try that on the next one.
All right.
All right, guys. Let's dive into this first one here. And this first one is actually, I watched about halfway through this thing to make sure it'd be something good to watch tonight. And the first one's actually more like 3 or 4 clips. So this may be more like 15 clever atheist flawless victories. But we'll kind of stop after each clip and give it a little discussion.
All right.
In other words, it's not a matter of whether you laugh or cry. It's a matter of how you think and what you think. And the realization that comes with it is congruent with many things, I believe, but not with the idea that truth can come from desert revelations made to schizophrenics and epileptics. That in his own words.
Any thoughts so far?
Well, I mean, it's true. Don't come to desert revelations with epileptics and so forth. I mean, I'm not sure anyone is basing a religion on that, but it's could be.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher Hitchens is always big on rhetoric, short on substance. So.
Yeah, just watch his debate with William Lane Craig. You'll see what happens when rhetoric meets substance.
Yeah, he actually defeated the debate.
It's like a fly versus a bazooka. It's really something to watch.
Yeah,
it is. Like, that was one of the debates, even when I was getting into apologetics, that I just kind of glossed over. It didn't hit my radar for some reason. And so I just saw it like a year ago. And it's like, wow. There's a reason atheists don't bring this debate up. Like, they'll bring up Hitchens against anybody else, but they don't bring that one up.
I saw an atheist website to describe it as Hitchens got spanked like a foolish child.
Right.
That's a perfect description.
Yeah, although, what is it about the redheaded stepchild that they always get the, they're always the one that you compare unsavory people to?
I don't know where that comes from. I know I've heard it a bunch of times, but I'm not sure of the history on that one.
Yeah,
folks who hate the Irish, probably.
Well, could be.
Quite possibly. All right, let's see if this gets any better.
That in his own words, without God we are nothing. My reply is, Your Eminence, please don't talk to me in that tone of voice. I'm not a slave, and I'm on the side of anyone who is in their emancipation. And it's the mind-forged manacles that are often the hardest to break. I'm sorry to tell the Cardinal Archbishop, and I wish I could say it to his face, I have to some of his colleagues, as you might say, that he's wrong twice. He's first wrong in his concept of a deity, in other words, as someone without whom we would be nothing. And he's wrong, second, to declare that we are worthless without agreeing with his concept of that concept. And I demand to know how he knows.
I mean, there really isn't anything of substantive here. I mean, they're just claims, not really much of an argument or evidence.
Yeah, and it's hard to really respond to these without the greater context of what Hitchens is saying, because he talked about slaves. Is he talking about the fact that the Bible calls us slaves to God, or is he talking about like Jewish slavery in the Old Testament? I'm not sure what exactly. I couldn't really tell without the context of what Hitchens is even trying to respond to here.
I think he's talking about like religion enslaves the mind. You need to be free from religion to free your mind.
Okay, I guess that makes sense. I can't really be too hard on Christopher Hitchens because he was actually pro-life, and my secular colleagues in the pro-life movement love to bring up a lot of his statements. So I can't really be too hard on Christopher Hitchens.
He was certainly enjoyable to listen to, but I think that goes for anybody with a British accent. So,
Oh yeah.
you know, and this clip's kind of difficult because I think, like I said, they've spliced like 2 or 3 clips together here, versus rather than just giving us one segment with all the context, they've just kind of taken a few lines from at least 1 or 2 different speeches, I believe, and put them together. So this last one, though, I think there's one more on here. Let's see.
His Eminence is claiming to know more than a primate can possibly know, and he's showing that he knows much less than most primates probably should.
So I guess we're just supposed to take it on faith, I guess, that these are flawless victories.
I believe so, because I mean, okay, if you're already an atheist, I see how these could be like clever comedic jabs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm thinking, you know, there's a Christian proverb that says, you know, a man who is the first to speak always appears to be right until someone comes and cross-examines him. And so it's like, you know, yeah, he's getting in these jabs, but, you know, these aren't substantive, for one thing. And, you know, number two, they're totally ignoring whether or not the person that Hitchens is debating with, you know, came back and gave an adequate rebuttal to any of Hitchens' statements. We're just supposed to take the videographer's word that these are flawless victories, and, you know, Christians don't have, I guess, a good response, is what he's getting at, I guess, by this video. I don't know, but yeah.
It's a little bit all over the place. One of the things about the Hitchen video that I noticed, like you said, there's a lot of claims there. But even like the comment about, you know, not taking revelation from, you know, a schizophrenic or epileptic in the desert.
Yeah.
You know, even that, you know, you have to, he's talking about truth there. If a schizophrenic in the desert claims something and it has other collaborating evidence, then there may be reason for us to believe that to be true. You know, for example, we have a lot of archaeological evidence to support many of the locations, many of the people in the Old Testament, as opposed to something like the claims of Muhammad, which were a revelation in the desert about an angel that tried to attack him. So, you know, we have to take every claim with a grain of salt, I think. I don't think there's any reason for us to believe anything somebody just drops at our feet. And I encourage my kids not to do that, to ask questions and to evaluate claims. And then it comes down to what you find on those claims. Maybe they'll be supported, maybe they won't, but you need to look at the evidence.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that Christopher Hitchens was a journalist. He wasn't a philosopher. So, you know, so he's big on rhetoric. That's something that he has to understand as a journalist, is he has to understand how to write, how to get people's attentions, how to get his thoughts across in a way that is persuasive, you know, first and foremost, persuasive. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong or has good evidence. The number one thing is Hitchens is trying to be persuasive in his atheism, and that's where he gets things wrong. You know, a good orator needs to be persuasive. He needs good rhetoric, but he also needs good evidence too. He needs to be correct in what he's expounding, and he has to be able to defend what he believes. And so what Hitchens is doing here is actually committing a logical fallacy called poisoning the well, in that he is calling folks like Moses and some of these other prophets, he's calling them epileptics and what was the other word he used?
Schizophrenics.
Right. Schizophrenics and epileptics. But he has to assume that God doesn't exist in order for Moses, for example, to be considered a schizophrenic, because if God exists, then it's completely plausible that Moses really did hear from God. So you have to assume God doesn't exist in order to make these claims about these people. And yeah, there might be someone like Muhammad, which Christians would consider to be false prophets, but we don't just reject necessarily Muhammad out of hand. We say, okay, you claim to have had an encounter with God, or with Joseph Smith, you claim to have read these golden plates by sticking your head in the hat. Well, what's the evidence for it? We need to see what evidence you have for these claims, because we won't just dismiss them out of hand because they're possible on a Christian worldview. But we don't just take these claims at face value. We need evidence for them. The Christians will make evidence for the claims found in the Old and New Testaments, and we will reject claims by Joseph Smith, Muhammad, and others based on Scripture, but also based on the lack of evidence that they have for these other so-called prophets.
That's a good point, and I think that's a distinction that a lot of people fail to make, because if they hear clever rhetoric, they'll often write off something that maybe is a loosely held belief just because somebody makes a clever remark about it. There are plenty of clever things that can be said about falsehoods, but it's really, what backs it up, like you said.
Yeah, I like what G.K. Chesterton. It's a little bit off topic, but I like what G.K. Chesterton said, that atheists are not free thinkers at all. It's the Christians who are free thinkers, because we under a Christian worldview, it's possible that we could believe in leprechauns or unicorns, or we can hold out the possibility that these things exist, but atheists can't believe that any of these things exist. They're not free to believe in other sort of supernatural or mythological beings. So it's actually the Christians, not the atheists, who are the true free thinkers. I always thought that was kind of an interesting point.
Well, it depends on the atheist. I mean, we were thinking of naturalists. Naturalists can't believe those things, but theoretically, an atheist could.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
I mean, like people in Iceland, they believe in, I can't remember what it was, but they believe like sort of mythical people, even though they don't believe in God.
Yeah.
What was
like frost giants?
No, it was something else.
Yeah. Okay, no, I think that's
gnomes. What's it?
Norse mythology, anyway.
Gnomes or elves or something. Elves. That's what it was. It was elves. More than half of Iceland believes in elves. 54% of Icelanders either believe in them or say it's possible they exist.
Okay.
Interesting.
So just because you're an atheist doesn't mean you can't believe other crazy things. Trust me, they can believe, some crazy stuff, just like some religious people believe some crazy stuff. It's just the world we live in.
Yeah.
Well, I think that covered it pretty well on the first one. I don't know how much we can do, given that it was kind of spliced together and didn't really give us a lot of substance. This next one's a little more of a solid clip, gives us some of the context, and doesn't so much apply to Christianity as much as it does Islam in the beginning. But I think you'll see where it goes. I'll kind of leave it at that.
Is why I draw Muhammad, ladies and gentlemen. This is why I do it. It's not because I want to make the Muslims angry. We weren't drawing Muhammad before they told us we couldn't, right? Nobody was doing that before they told us we couldn't. They told us we couldn't, and that made us angry, because they're not allowed to tell us that we have to obey their rules. They're not allowed to make us obey their rules. So here is here's this. This is an eye, and an eye, and a mouth. There. Ooh, ooh, ooh. It's lousy, but I depict this as the Prophet Muhammad of Islam. Now, this is a good thing to do. This is how we protect our rights of expression, by exercising our rights of expression. When somebody says you can't do that, it's time to do.
Oh, did we lose Caleb? Oh, your mic is muted there.
Really?
I think I dropped out on you guys there.
Yeah. So the
Sorry.
video cut out.
Sorry
Something
about
about drawing Muhammad on his hand. And
Yeah. Yeah, so let me get back into that. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. It kicked me out of StreamYard here. So
who is this speaking here? I don't recognize him.
I have no idea. I don't recognize him either. And they don't seem to give anything in the description of the video to say who this is.
Yeah.
My initial thought was maybe this was somebody in one of the journalist groups that, famous for doing Muhammad drawings and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm honestly not sure. I haven't seen this guy before.
Okay.
All right. Well, hopefully it won't kick me out again. And we'll try this again. I rewound a few seconds here for anything we lost.
It's time to do it loud. You can't do that. It's time to do it a lot. It's time to do it loud. And ladies and gentlemen, I am only in danger if I am perceived to be alone. I'm holding up this. And if I am the only one holding up the Prophet Muhammad's face, I'm a target. But if we all do it, no one's a target. And so I invite all of you to take out your pens.
That's right by that.
All of you to draw a smiley face on your hands. And I invite all of you to depict, thank you, the Prophet Muhammad on yourself. Because this is how we hold back religious tyranny, by denying it, by opposing it, tooth and nail. This is how we keep our freedoms, ladies and gentlemen.
Even if we had multiple contemporaneous.
All right.
Well, I believe in freedom of speech, freedom of religion. So, I mean, that's all good. I mean, I wouldn't draw Muhammad myself, but.
Yeah, I mean, I took issue with very little of what he was saying. I don't believe religious people ought to be forcing non-religious people to abide by their religious rules. Now, there are some limitations to that because, a lot of atheists will say that as a Christian, I shouldn't tell them that they can't have abortions. But that's a different thing. That's not a religious belief of mine. That's a moral belief of mine. And if my belief is true that abortion kills human beings, then nobody ought to have them. So that's not a religious belief I'm trying to force on anybody else, even though they try to make it a religious issue. So there are some limitations to that. But for the most part, yeah, I don't believe in forcing non-religious people to abide by, Christian religious doctrines or, Muslim religious doctrines or anything like that. So.
Yeah, I'm in kind of the same boat with you there. I wasn't opposed to a lot of it. The one idea there that, at least from this short clip, and maybe this wouldn't even be there in the greater context of things, but the one idea I do kind of oppose to from the whole video is doing something just because someone tells you not to, or taking an action just because it's something a religious group believes. Like, that's not a good reason to take an action on something. I completely agree with the fact that we need to have freedom, even the freedom to criticize beliefs is perfectly reasonable. But the fact of the matter is, you shouldn't just do something because someone tells you not to. I go through this with my kids all the time. If they put their hand on the stove every time I told them not to, they're gonna get hurt. So I think there has to be a good reason behind doing something as well. If that's demonstrating that a belief is false or untrue, then that may be a good reason to do it. But you shouldn't just do something just because it's what the religion tells you not to do.
Yeah. And he said, if he does it, he's a target. If they all do it, no one's a target. I think he's forgetting about suicide bombers. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's necessarily true that a lot of people wouldn't be a target if they all did it. So yeah.
That's a good point. You know, if it's widely held in a country, the whole country becomes a target.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why the Crusades were a thing. The Christians were trying to retake their lands from Muslim invaders.
I'm also trying to look to see here if I can find out exactly who this is.
Oh, the guy in the video?
Yeah, I was trying to look that up to see if there was any.
Yeah, I wonder if he's an illustrator or someone who does cartoons or something, which is why he was talking about drawing Muhammad.
That's what I wondered too. So
I wouldn't care about not being able to draw Muhammad because I can't draw. I'm limited to stick figures.
Right.
Could be Muhammad, could be Jesus, could be Cinderella for all anyone knows.
Right, and I think that's another good point with his illustration too. You know, by drawing a face on his hand, you know, it's all about how we interpret that. If he says it's Muhammad, it's Muhammad. It could just as easily be any other face, and I think he's pointing out the ridiculousness of that particular view that this is such a great crime to draw Muhammad among the Islamic community.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely some humor probably involved there as well in the point that he's trying to make. So I can't find anything on exactly who that guy is. But if listeners, if you recognize it, throw it in the chat. We'd love to find out and maybe look up and get a little more backstory on him. All right. So this next one's one of my personal favorites out of the new Atheist. So I always found Sam Harris a little bit more interesting than the rest of them. Yeah. But he still has some real winners in terms of the comments he makes.
Yeah, I've read 2 out of 4. I've read books by 2 out of 4 of the 4 horsemen of the new atheism. I've read a book by Dawkins, The God Delusion, and I've read one by Sam Harris. I've read The Moral Landscape, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
And I think I would, you know, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. I think I'd probably consider Sam Harris to be the most sophisticated of the 4 horsemen. You know, I don't think what he says is true. Like he tries to throw philosophy out the window and make a purely scientific grounding for morals. And the thing is that he does appeal back to Aristotle in The Moral Landscape, and so it's like he accepts just enough philosophy to be able to talk coherently about morals, and then he rejects just enough philosophy to try and pretend like it's based entirely on science. I remember reading an article by an actual atheist philosopher who kind of eviscerated Harris over his arguments in The Moral Landscape. So, yeah, so somewhat familiar with Harris, but yeah, I think he's probably the one I like the most out of the 4. I would think.
Me too. But this is largely out of, like, for example, have you ever listened to one of his Making Sense podcasts?
No, I haven't.
Okay, like, for example, he had a recent one called "Can We Pull Back from the Brink," where he talks about racial tensions and actually has some really intelligent things to say. It's like, yeah, I could have gotten Coleman Hughes, a black guy, to say this stuff for me, but that would be a bit cowardly. So I'm just going to try to say stuff that makes sense out of this whole mess.
Yeah.
He's one of those people who leans left politically, but he's like one of the saner types where he's not like hard left and say, okay, some of this stuff has gone too far, folks.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, you know, I can respect anybody who does that. Peter Boghossian's another one that I've gained more respect for recently because he does that. If he sees something ridiculous out there, like critical theory, pushes back against it.
Yeah, Yeah, got to give him props for that because I have read his manual for creating atheists, and it was pretty bad for someone who's an actual philosopher. Like it was really simplistic, really unsophisticated, and just flat out wrong in a lot of places. So it's kind of bizarre, but yeah, he's really been doing some good work, kind of pushing back on, and even though it's kind of ironically, even though he proclaims in his book that faith is a virus and that Christians are mentally ill, he's actually been working with a Christian to kind of push back against this whole critical theory thing. So he and a Christian have been kind of working together in that regard. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't read Manual for Creating Atheists. It's on my list at some point, but I did read his more recent book, How to Have Impossible Conversations.
Oh, I got to read that. I have read Manual for Creating Atheists. That's bad, but I expect How to Have Difficult Conversations is really good. He's gotten some, there's some things I disagree with him, but there are some things that I think he's done a lot of good work in. So let's be a lesson to you folks. It's not all black and white. Atheists can do some pretty good things, even if we disagree.
Right. Yeah, I didn't even know he had written another book. That is a valuable topic, especially in our modern political climate.
Yeah, it's a really good book. It touches on religious stuff a few times, just as example conversations.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to interject here real quick. If you go on to, I don't know if it's still there, but I remember going on to the Amazon account for A Manual for Creating Atheists because I was just kind of reading through some of the reviews, and atheist superstar PZ Myers wrote a review, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but I do remember that he ended with, "The best manual for creating atheists is still the Bible." So, yeah, that was. I just thought that was kind of a funny.
I've got an animated. I'm sure I've been working on. It's going to make fun of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Hasn't been released yet, but I'm working on it.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that.
That'll be good. Yeah. And just to kind of throw this out there about that most recent book, though, it was very good. I think people on both sides, anybody who picks this book up could get some good stuff from it. It's not as beneficial as, say, something like Tactics, which I think applies to any conversation you could ever engage in. But it's kind of the next one along those lines. Covers a lot of the same ground, but really touches on how to empathize with people and get somewhere productive in conversation versus just end up in a shouting match every time. So I got to give him some props for that. It was a good book.
Well, cool.
All right. So without further ado, Mr. Harris.
Contemporaneous claims of the miracles of Jesus, this would not be good enough, because miracle stories abound even in the 21st century. The devotees of the South Indian guru Satya Sai Baba ascribe all of the miracles of Jesus to him. He reads minds, he foretells the future, he raises the dead, he was born of a virgin. Okay, Satya Sai Baba is not a fringe figure. You might not have heard of him, but they had a birthday party for him a few years ago, and 1 million people showed up. There are vast numbers of people who think he's a living God. Okay, so Christianity is predicated on the claim that miracle stories, exactly of the kind that today surround a person like Satya Sai Baba, become especially credible when you place them in the pre-scientific religious context of the first century Roman Empire, decades after their supposed occurrence, as attested to by copies of copies of copies of ancient Greek and largely discrepant manuscripts. We have Satya Sai Baba's miracle stories attested to by thousands upon thousands of living eyewitnesses, and they don't even merit an hour on cable television. And yet you put a few miracle stories in an ancient book, and half the people on the earth think it a legitimate project to organize their lives around them. Does anyone else see a problem with that?
How to survive 2012.
Was that what's his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson in the next clip? I guess we'll get to it in a minute.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I was going to say that really sounded like him.
That was pretty good, recognizing that from that short of of a clip there.
I mean, he has a very recognizable voice. So, yeah.
True. All right. So I think Harris really makes two main claims here. One, he attempts to discredit miracles. And then two, he attempts to discredit the reliability of the New Testament, which is kind of a lot for a 15-second clip.
Right.
Any thoughts off the bat on this one?
This is what I get for not having watched the video we're looking at. We'd have to compare. One thing we'd have to do is we have to compare the evidence. Like, okay, are the evidence really on par? Where we have, like, for example, we know the guy died, and we know the guy was buried, and the tomb was empty, and then a lot of people claim to see him, and these people who claim to see him were willing to die for their beliefs. I mean, is the evidence really on a par? I'm not convinced that it is, but I haven't looked into it.
Yeah, I mean, my response would pretty much be the same. We have very good reasons for believing that Jesus was the Messiah. That number one, there were some very specific prophecies that he fulfilled, which would not be within his power to fulfill, such as being born in Bethlehem and being a Nazarene and all these kinds of things. So there's the fulfilled prophecy aspect of Jesus's life, which, some could be coincidental, but, being born of a virgin is something that you can't exactly pull off on your own. So there are some very specific prophecies that Jesus fulfilled that, he would have absolutely no power over. And then, of course, we have the evidence from the back end of his life, that after Christ was crucified, we have extra biblical accounts that talk about the life of Jesus and about his crucifixion, and about the Christians who, we have Christians who were once fearful individuals who are now, bold proclaimers of Christ. And not only were their lives changed from one of cowardice to one of boldness, but they also started the Christian religion, which is based on Christ crucified and resurrected in the same town in which Christ was crucified. That is religious suicide to do so, because all the Romans would have had to do is just produce the body, and that would have quelched the new Christian religion. So that was something that is not very smart to do unless they were actually telling the truth. And then, of course, as Maverick Christian said, we also have accounts of the disciples who actually died. They didn't just die for what they believed they didn't just die because people can die for a lie if they believe it to be true, but these were actual eyewitnesses of Jesus. And so someone, as the argument goes, someone would not die for something that they know to be a lie. So they went to death. They went to the death for believing and proclaiming Christ's crucifixion and resurrection and ascension. And so if it was a lie, they never would have been able to. They wouldn't have gone to the death for it. So we have a lot of really, really good evidence that Christ is the Messiah. And so we would just kind of need to compare. We have very strong evidence for Christ as a Messiah. And this other guy that Harris is bringing up, I've never heard of him. I'm not going to try to reproduce his name because it might come off as offensive trying to do that. So we would have to examine the evidence. Is the evidence for this guy being God and anywhere near comparable to the weight of the evidence that we have for Christ? I'm highly skeptical.
Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with this guy either. I should be more so, but Satya Sai Baba, there's my attempt at the name. Was
see, I was going to say Alibaba, but I was afraid that might be a little offensive to some people. So
it's still fairly close. So he was a guru in Hinduism, and there were some early reports of miracles, including materialization of objects from thin air, and then reports of faith healings as well. So now, granted, I haven't investigated everything. I've heard Sam Harris talk about him a few times, so I'm sure he knows probably a little bit more about this guy than I do. But, based on that, we have plenty of reports of faith healing today. We know a lot of the ways that those methods are accomplished via, natural thing. So if you don't, then a good place to start is watching one of Darren Brown's mentalism specials.
Mhm.
He covers extensively faith healings, how to do that. A lot of it involves borderline hypnosis and suggestibility techniques, materializing objects out of thin air. That's called sleight of hand.
Mhm. Which you know a little something about, right, Caleb?
A little bit.
Yeah, so it's possible that what this guy's doing is just parlor tricks, but then of course the atheist will just come back. Well, Jesus was just doing parlor tricks. He didn't really walk on water. It was the way that the sun was hitting, it was reflecting off the lake that made it appear like he was walking on water, or all these kinds of things. But once again, we can just kind of look at the evidence, because Jesus did miracles that fooled people. Like when Jesus turned water into wine, he didn't just turn water into wine, he turned it into the good stuff that the master of the party said, you saved the best one for last. And so Jesus was actually, he wasn't just fooling people. He was actually doing what the gospel writers are proclaiming, and it's really, really difficult to fake a death and a resurrection. After everything that Jesus went through, being scourged, being nailed to a cross, having his side pierced with a spear, all of these things, you're not gonna, if you're not really God, you're not gonna, make a comeback from that. If you do, you're gonna be, in pretty pathetic shape. You're not gonna be, convincing anyone that you're a resurrected king. So, it's possible that he's just a charlatan, but it's also possible that maybe what he's doing is true, because, he may have access to the demonic realm, which of course Christians affirm. So it's possible that he could do things that are able to, really do things that might be seen as miraculous. So in that case, we could just say, we have the scriptures to fall back on. If he's doing these things in the name of Christ, we can say, well, yeah, he's working, God is working these miracles through him. But otherwise, we just have the scriptures to teach us and make sure that we're not led astray by those who would, the wolves in sheep's clothing, etc.
So I can buy a baby like water into wine. Okay, I can see how that might be a magic trick, but being crucified by the Romans, I mean, these guys knew how to kill people.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and one interesting thing about Sati Sai Baba is he died on April 24th, 2011.
Mm.
So, this guy's faith healings only went so far.
I mean, has he had like any post-death resurrection visions from anyone, or?
No, he claimed reincarnation. He claimed that he would be reincarnated and come back at some point. So who knows how many people have popped up saying they're reincarnated as this guy, because he had quite a fortune when he died, it sounds like. So
would they be like 9 years old?
Yeah, that's right. So, we should expect here in about 11 years, somebody will pop up and claim his fortune.
Right.
We'll see if they actually get it, though.
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting thing. I'm probably going to research more into this guy just because I enjoy this culty side of stuff. And this guy is definitely verging on a cult leader. So it sounds interesting for further research, at least.
The reincarnated guy should at least be able to bend air, or I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
Was that an Avatar joke?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I've only seen the M. Night Shyamalan movie, so
no.
I can't go by that.
This show is so much better.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I've heard the show is really good. So, yeah.
One other thing I want to note here, on a serious note, is Sam Harris also trashes the reliability of the New Testament.
Hmm.
And he does that by stating we have copies of copies of copies of copies, and that they're not very good copies. Well, one, we have an awful lot of copies, a lot of fragment of copies, a lot of them.
And a lot of early copies, too.
And a lot of early copies. And to Sam Harris's credit, a lot of those have errors. A lot of them do. But what the information that's missing here is somewhat deceptive, because it's actually a lot of those errors that help us ascertain the reliability of the original text, because 95+% of the errors we have within our manuscripts and our copies of copies are grammatical in some sense. So they're missing punctuation, they're missing letters, they're, run-on sentences, that sort of thing. So these are largely grammatical errors.
It's funny because
And
if I were an atheist, like this would be like the last thing I would attack about Christian.
when you have you cut out a little bit there. You said it'd be the last thing you'd attack.
Yeah. If I were an atheist, I mean, all right, do the manuscript, do what is the New Testament we have is matched pretty closely to the original. It's like if I were an atheist, this would be the last thing I'd attack, because the documentation evidence for the New Testament is so much stronger for any other ancient manuscript we have. It's like there's way weaker points to attack for Christianity than that. Good grief.
Right.
I mean, it's not quite as bad as saying Jesus never existed, which is also completely pointless for an atheist to do. But I said it's towards that direction. Like, why are you even attacking that? You don't need to do this.
But Richard Carrier has proven that Jesus didn't exist.
Yeah. Richard Carrier, the unemployed blogger.
Yeah, let's bring Nick on and get his opinion of Richard Carrier.
So, yeah, I completely agree. If you're going to attack anything about Christianity, really the reliability of the New Testament is kind of the last thing you would want to attack, just because the volumes of physical evidence we have that it's been recreated accurately, that we have early copies that match our later copies. Even a conservative estimate puts it at 99% accurate in terms of the recreation of the original text. And that 1% left is not anything that affects major doctrinal differences.
I mean, you can attack how factual it was. I wouldn't attack to see, okay, were the documents we have match the originals. I wouldn't attack that, because that's like, even if you, that's like so, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, because it's like, even an atheist can grant it. It's like, okay, so the documents we have were very similar to the ones originally put out. You could be like, so what? That doesn't even come close to being sufficient evidence for Christianity. You can acknowledge that. It's like saying, like, just like I'm not a Muslim, but does that mean I have to deny things like Muhammad not existing, or that the documents weren't close to originals? Like, no, I don't really have to do that.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's an excellent point as well. So I'm going to throw in another plug for Question Christianity right now, because we're actually discussing the reliability of the New Testament coming up on Monday. So if listeners are like, you know what, I really, really buy into this, Sam Harris is right about this, come on over to the Question Christianity Facebook page Monday night. We're going to dive into it in more detail. All right, so... Oh, no.
Did you lose the video?
I lost the video, didn't I? Oh, boy.
Oh, no.
All right. Well, we're stalling. So, yes. Go to my Patreon. I've put the values down there way too cheap. Now I'm realizing, like, okay, what do I have? Like $1, $2 values. That's it. And then I'm looking at Caption Creation. It's like 5 or 10. It's like, man, I'm doing this all wrong. I'm giving away these like free behind the scenes videos for $2, and that's less than Capture Christianity's minimum.
Well, there you go. And if somebody's signing up for Patreon, definitely go check out Maverick Christians. And then, since you can get it so cheap over there, come on over to the Mentionables Patreon as well.
Yeah.
And sign up and get, a Apologetics Book of the Month Club.
Aha.
Not so cheap, but worth it. All right, I got us back here now.
All right.
Finally. So we'll dive back into the wonderful Neil deGrasse Tyson. Oh, let's see. I never actually lost the video. I just thought I had.
Oh.
How to survive 2012. Tactics and survival places for the coming pole shift. Pole shift? Where'd they get that from? The pole? The end of the world? In there is the Mayan calendar? Because clearly the Mayans knew more about astrophysics than any of us do today. Clearly. And wait a minute. Next Saturday. Whoa, next Saturday. Whoa. What country is this?
Hey, what date did that guru?
Millennium is this?
What was that, Clint?
I say, what day did that guru die?
That was April 24th, 2011.
Oh, so, you know.
Yeah, close enough. You could do some math calculations and get there.
Yeah, maybe that's what the Mayan calendar was predicting. But it's a little
You're
over.
off by a year.
Yeah, off by a month or so.
I think wasn't the May 21st thing? Wasn't that Harold Camping?
No. Well, no, he's talking about the Mayan calendar.
Oh, okay.
No, never mind. No, that was 2012. Never mind. Yeah, I think, Harold Camping, I think, was the 2011.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
So what's interesting is originally they said the world was going to end May 21st, but then it was revised. And so apparently the 21st is only Judgment Day. So Jesus is coming on the 21st. And I'm guessing that he's really pissed, okay? So at human beings. So 5 months later is the asserted end of the world, as evidenced right here, the end of the world. And there's not much sand left in that clock. You can translate this into any language. There's an audio reading of this, and you can get the printer-friendly PDF version of this account. What country is this? I'll show you where this. Answering the question: did human beings, as we know them, develop from an earlier species of animals? This is simply evolution by natural selection. So if you're this, this is countries ranked, sort of Western countries and countries that are otherwise developed by the modern use of that word. So if you're this sort of the green bar, it means yes to that question, which means that you're convinced by evolution. If you're this sort of amber bar on the right, it means no. And if you're the white in between, it means you're unsure. So America's got to be up there somewhere. No, Iceland, Denmark, Sweden, France, Japan, Britain, Norway, Belgium, Spain, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Hungary, Luxembourg, Iceland, Slovenia, Finland, Czech Republic, Estonia, Portugal, Malta, Switzerland, Slavic Republic, Poland, Austria, Croatia, Romania, Greece, Bulgaria, Lithuania, Latvia, Cyprus, United States of America, edging out Turkey by a nose. There it is. What country is this? Maybe we should just move back to the cave.
How do you?
Well, I, for one, am glad that Neil deGrasse Tyson is comforting me that I don't have to worry about 2012. I was worried about that recently.
Right.
Yeah, because they've revised that now. A bunch of people have went out and done some math on it, as they always do. And so now it's actually, what's today? The
June 20th.
The 20th. Yeah, it was today. So they revised it, and today was supposed to be the actual end of the Mayan calendar. So we've got about an hour and 18 minutes left here before another prediction proves itself false.
Crap, I really wanted to see that Wonder Woman movie too.
Yeah, I mean, they did that movie 2012 back when the Mayan calendar was all the rage, and they never did a sequel based on the revised year.
Yeah, see, the revisions just came out like a month or so ago. So
we need a 2020 movie.
Mm-hmm. but they can't be out there making movies right now. So,
Oh, that's true.
that does worry me about next year, though. The fact that movie studios haven't been doing anything for the last 3 to 4
Well,
months.
It's not that they haven't been doing anything, because actually there was a studio that actually kind of made headlines that they've gone back and to start recording a film again. But there are some movies slated to come out. One I'm looking forward to is Bill and Ted Face the Music, which is hitting theaters in August. I saw the trailer for it, and I'm cautiously optimistic. I hope that they don't buy into the whole SJW critical theory thing and it ruins the film. I'm really, really hoping that they keep it apolitical and just give us, a proper conclusion to that trilogy. That's all I'm hoping for. But the trailer looked pretty good. So.
I am cautiously pessimistic.
Yeah, why pessimistic?
It's like the trailer's like, it doesn't impress me that much, and we're all familiar with sequelitis.
Well, yeah, but but Bill and Ted, 20 years, this is the last sequel. Sequelitis can be a bad thing, but I don't know. I don't really have a good response to that. I'm just holding out hope that Bill and Ted Face the Music and Ghostbusters Afterlife are both going to be very good movies. I'm hoping, but that's why I'm cautiously optimistic, because, it's been so long since these movies have been made that it's like, are they able just to kind of get back in the swing of things and give us the old, keep the momentum up from the previous films.
I mean, Rufus isn't back also.
No,
Bring him back, but I miss George Carlin. We could use him right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really they could do about that. So, unfortunately, we don't have George Carlin around anymore. But yeah,
okay, he's an atheist. God, please bring him back.
Right. Yeah, although the first thing people keep saying that Keanu Reeves doesn't age, but excuse me, the first thing I noticed when I saw the trailer is, man, Bill and Ted look really old. So I don't buy that Keanu Reeves never ages, because he looked old in the trailer.
Yeah, well, he's aged a bit since the past 30 years somehow.
Yeah.
The bad news is there's probably going to be another end of the world prediction between now and then. So, I would stick with the pessimistic side, because you may not even get to see it. So, there's that.
Yeah. Hopefully my dream will come true and I'll get to see Bill and Ted in one last time travel adventure.
Well, I hope you're correct, Clinton.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I kind of went off on this tangent because I don't know if Neil deGrasse Tyson really said anything worth responding to in that clip.
Well, I think he sort of has a point. I think the idea is that the United States is sort of like relatively primitive, prone to superstition, and hey, we can go back to Iceland again with their elves.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I was going to raise. I mean, they just talked about Iceland.
But how exactly is this a flawless victory for atheism, though? I mean, we can have a discussion about it.
Yeah, it's not really like an atheism thing. It's more like, hey, let's pick on the U.S. because some folks don't believe in evolution, which, here, independently minded Christian here, I kind of sympathize with. I'm an evolutionist. I think Christians should be more accepting of evolution than they are, or at least be more open to the evidence and recognize ancient Near Eastern culture, how it was more prone to figurative language, a lot of people think, and how Dr. William Lane Craig, who is a conservative Christian who accepts biblical inerrancy, also believes in common descent. And C.S. Lewis believed in evolution. He also believed that humans evolved from lower forms of life. And I do think it's kind of unfortunate how contemporary Christian America isn't at least more open to the idea than they are right now. I think it is kind of unfortunate fact of American Christianity.
Yeah, but then again, he's picking on the U.S. specifically. How many of those countries up there are religious countries? There are other countries besides the United States which are religious, like Ireland, for one, is a Catholic country. And others have religion as well. So it's not like all those other countries that beat out the United States are just atheistic utopias or anything like that.
Yeah, it is a bit of weird. I remember reading a Stephen Jay Gould article in my philosophy of religion class, how we talked about with Catholics, and they're British Catholics, like, what do these Americans deal with evolution? Can you tell us more about that? And yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily inherent with religion itself. I mean, it's kind of like when you say, okay, is religion a good influencer in society, or is religion a bad influence in society? And the super obvious question a lot of people don't think of is, it depends on the religion. I mean, even with Christianity, it really depends on the flavor of Christianity you're working with. Some flavors of Christianity are quite happy to accept evolution, like Catholicism, and some more fundamentalist sects are saying, no, it's the devil's work. Some flavors of Christianity are more intellectual, like William Lane Craig, and some are like KJV only. We don't have to read the original Greek even. This is even more reliable than the Greek, apparently.
I mean, if it was good enough for Paul, it's good enough for me. But yeah, but even then, though, that's just one specific question, because even if no Christians believed in evolution, you still couldn't make the case that Christianity has been a bad influence on society, because Christians have done a lot of good in a lot of areas. Now, we can put the question of evolution aside, because Christianity has always been on the forefront of scientific advancement. The guy who discovered the Big Bang was a Catholic priest. There were, Catholic nuns have made great discoveries for science, and even we tend to think of the Middle Ages as the Dark Ages, but there was a lot of scientific progress being made during the Middle Ages. So Christianity has always been on the forefront of scientific advancement, and it's always been a friend of intellectual development. Christians are responsible for hospitals, and they're responsible for universities. And then, there's even the question of, what has Christians done socially? Well, it's usually the Christians that run first into places where diseases are running rampant. With no regard for their own safety, they go and help other people who are in need. And Christians have ended, very, very bad social issues, like the ancient Christians ended the practice of infanticide in ancient Rome and the practice of foot binding in China. So, Christianity, even if we set aside the question of evolution, has been a great force for good in society. So if the only thing you care about is evolution, then yeah, maybe you can make the case that it hasn't, but that's a very, very simplistic way of thinking about what benefits society.
And as you guys mentioned, we were talking about, this is just one question. When you actually compare religiosity in the U.S., we're looking at, in the U.S., we have around 73% of people who identify as either Protestant or Catholic. Iceland, based on the quick stats I could pull up, 80% of Icelanders actually are part of the Lutheran state church, and then another 5% are in other denominations. So we're talking about more than 12% more religiosity in Iceland than we have here in the U.S. So I think to try and attribute the lack of belief in evolution in the U.S. to religiosity is a faulty accusation.
And I think it's accurate. It's just that it depends on the religion. So for good or ill in the U.S., we have that type of religion, that type of Christianity that tends to be more fundamentalistic. Whereas if you go to another country, some religions aren't nearly that way. Some flavors of Christianity are quite okay with accepting evolution. It just, like I said, it depends on the religion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I myself have not completely bought into evolution. I consider myself skeptical, but open to it. So I don't think the evidence is as secure as they believe it is, but I could be wrong. It's just not a question that's ever been of interest to me. So if I'm talking to someone who accepts evolution, I'll just accept evolution for the sake of conversation. It's not really an important question to me, because it's not something that makes or breaks Christianity.
Yeah, I'm right there in the same ballpark with you, Clinton. It's one of those things that I've looked at it from multiple angles. I haven't been convinced by the evidence I've read, but it's certainly compelling in a lot of ways. So I find it fascinating to study the evidence and study the arguments on both sides of that issue. But when it comes down to talking about it with other people, it's one of those things I want to set aside, because it doesn't impact the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ.
Yeah, and I will say that, I think evolutionists make compelling points too. So, I wouldn't say that that it's just hokum or anything like that. It's just not something I've looked into enough to really draw a firm conclusion on either way.
Yeah. All right. Looks like we got Dawkins next. This should be fun.
Yeah.
Number 3. I hope these top 3 get better and more flawless than the
or at least
the past 4.
Or at least hopefully they get more on topic to the question.
We can hope.
You think now that the world actually began?
Rewind
How
that
do
just a bit.
you think now that the world actually began?
The world began, the Earth began by condensing out of a disk of gas. The sun and all the planets were a disk of gas. They condensed at about 4.6 billion years ago. The sun became the great bulk of the disk. The great bulk of the disk became the sun, and then the planets were spinning around. That's how the world began. The universe began rather longer ago, about 13 or 14 billion years ago. And how that happened is more problematical. Physicists are working on that. As for life, which is my subject, well, that didn't start till 3-point-something billion years ago and has been evolving ever since.
That's fascinating.
At the age of 9, I wouldn't say that I was an atheist. I'd say that I just became aware that there were lots of different religions and they couldn't all be right, which is a bit different from being atheist.
To me, as a
So I think we spoke there. It wasn't 13 to 14 million years ago. It's 13 to 14 billion years ago. And he sort of avoids the main problem for atheism, which is like, how did physical reality begin? It's like, oh, how did the Earth begin? It's like, oh, condensing matter. And it's like, yeah, that's great, but that's not really where the problem for atheism is. Mm. I mean, in addition to the scientific evidence, there's like various, I mean, you can look at Capturing Christianity's channel about like scientific evidence for physical beginning. There's also like a lot of good philosophical reasons to think that time itself had to have a beginning. And if space-time itself had to have a beginning, then you're going to need a cause. And if space-time had a beginning, whatever begins to exist had a cause, then the cause would have to transcend space and time. And even if we just stop there, we don't go to all the other philosophical reasons for thinking that the cause is God or God-like. The idea that you'd have some sort of cause transcending space and time, creating the universe, would have to be, even if you don't want to call it supernatural, at least outside the physical laws as we know them. And a transcendent first cause is already pretty problematic for atheism. So in my opinion, he's sort of ignoring the major problem. He's kind of using like a sort of science of the gaps. We don't know, but maybe science will discover someday. It's like, we have pretty good reasons to believe that we're not going to find a naturalistic explanation for this. And of course, he doesn't address it, and maybe that isn't the realm for it, but that is a big problem that he doesn't address in that video. Not to mention fine-tuning. Fine-tuning is a whole other ball of wax. This is also very problematic for atheism.
Yeah, and like Christopher Hitchens was a journalist, not a philosopher. Richard Dawkins is a biologist, not a philosopher. Now he has he has less he has less of an excuse than Hitchens does, because scientists should be trained in logic and philosophy, because you have to bring a philosophy to your science in order to interpret it correctly. So the fact that he's so bad at philosophy is really kind of bizarre for someone in his position. But his book, The God Delusion, has been eviscerated by an atheist, just like Harris's book. You can find a video of Michael Roos, an atheist philosopher, saying that the God Delusion actually made him ashamed to be an atheist because of how simplistic it is. Dawkins doesn't seem aware that theists have very grown-up answers to atheist critiques, and Dawkins just treats them as if they're just childish replies. So when Dawkins talks about, when he came to this quote, realization, end quote, that there are a lot of different religions and they can't all be right. Well, of course, that leads to the next question is, well, how does that prove that any one religion is wrong? Just because there are a lot of different religions and they can't all be right doesn't mean that none of them are right. That's illogical thinking. So, yeah, I'm a Christian, and yeah, there are, a lot of different religions, but I have good reason for believing that Christianity is true. If a Muslim wants to convince me of the Quran, or a Buddhist wants to convince me of Buddhism, they're going to have to show me the evidence, because I have evidence for Christianity. They have to disprove the evidence that I have and then show me why the weight of the evidence rests on Buddhism or Islam or that kind of thing. So we need to investigate the evidence. So that's just a really, really poor way of reasoning out of religion. Because you can even think, there are a number of different theories people have for how life came about. You have evolution. You have fundamentalist Christians who believe God created Adam and Eve as fully functioning adults. You have people who think that life came in on the backs of crystals, and that's how life got started. All of these different views. But I'm sure Dawkins wouldn't say, well, there are all these different views about how life got started, so obviously they all must be wrong. That kind of reasoning wouldn't fly with Dawkins as an argument against evolution, so it shouldn't fly with him as an argument against religion.
Well, I think that a couple of things. One, Dawkins, as a biologist, I think scientists should have some training in philosophy, but I don't think that's part of their standard education, even philosophy of science. So it doesn't surprise me that he's so ignorant about philosophy. Second thing is that what Dawkins apparently doesn't seem to realize is that all these religions, like, there are lots of beliefs about gods. Well, atheism fits in that category as a belief about God. So he's like, there's so many beliefs about gods out there, therefore my belief is right because there's so many. It's like that doesn't follow at all.
Right. Yeah.
That's actually just a terrible argument. Which, maybe if he'd taken some philosophy, maybe he would have realized that. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he avoids, like Clinton mentioned, he avoids the issue with the beginning. For one, and then to write off a naturalistic explanation for life starting on this planet, even something in his specialty. I mean, in the God delusion, his answer to why life is here, the best thing he's got is it came from another planet. It came from somewhere else out there. So he just puts it off on, well, I guess it originated on another planet somewhere in the universe, and essentially, I mean, it's alien life that began life on this planet.
I don't think he maybe floated direct in panspermia as a possibility, but I don't think Dawkins actually accepts it. I mean, I would suspect he accepts something like the RNA world hypothesis.
If I recall, in the God delusion, he very explicitly states that, but I could be wrong. You probably know more on this than I do. So that'd be an interesting one to talk about down the road. That's what I recall from my reading.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've read it, so I couldn't remember. But actually, I was thinking maybe we could do an episode one of these days about some of the atheist books that we've read.
That could be good too.
Might be good to show anyone who listens that we take atheist thinkers seriously, and we read the books so we can know what they believe and how to respond, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know there's a very good, I actually enjoyed watching his videos for a while. There was a YouTuber that went through and did reviews of Christian apologetic books, and he was an atheist. And of course it has some of the same problems of these videos, but it was much more honest than flawless atheist victories kind of thing. So it at least went through and gave a fair critique, a fair perspective from an atheist viewpoint. So something like that'd be really cool.
Yeah, and at least he read the book. So, even if he wasn't convinced by it, at least he's able to give a, more intelligent, reasoned response, having just gone through it and, rather than just reading something on an internet infidel's website and repeating it.
Right. All right. Let's see. We got 2 to go. You guys impressed yet?
Not so much.
So they couldn't all be right, which is a bit different from being atheist.
To me, as a scientist, there's a huge problem right from the start with this kind of reasoning, which is that it is the whole strategy is one based on some a priori metaphysics. That is to say, this is very much armchair philosophizing in the best sense of the word, sitting down, thinking about all the possible ways the world can be, and concluding that those ways must somehow involve the idea of God. There's no step in that process in which you actually go out and look at how the universe actually is. You don't need to in this way of thinking about it, because you can just argue logically that God must be part of the universe. It is my firm belief that this kind of reasoning has never taught us anything true and interesting about the actual world. If you want to actually figure out our universe, does it involve some notion of God? That is an actual fact about the specific universe in which we live. And I personally don't think that this a priori kind of reasoning is ever going to get us there.
Those people who would say,
well, unfortunately, we don't know what argument he's referring to. So for all we know, maybe the a priori argument he's attacking is complete garbage, or maybe it's good. We have no idea. But can a priori theorizing ever tell us anything about the universe? Well, of course it can. So we can know that there's no married bachelor out there, for example. Even if we just stick to mathematics, we know that there is no physical Turing machine complete with a head over an infinitely long tape capable of solving a halting problem. And so if you don't know, a Turing machine is basically like a computer. It's like a machine over a head. Each step it can write to a head, it can move left, move right, or stop. What you can show is that suppose you put a computer program on there and some input. Can you build a Turing machine that determines whether this program will halt as opposed to just going on forever, like an if loop or something? And it turns out you can't build a physical Turing machine like that. You can't build any Turing machine like that. And that was like really surprising. You can show that a priori. And so there are actually a number of remarkable things you can show a priori. And something like the a priori arguments that you might think are a priori aren't actually really a priori. So for example, there's some, well, not completely a priori anyway. So like, for example, we know that the past has to be finite because of certain philosophical paradoxes that emerges. I just have a paper recently accepted for publication called the Eternal Society Paradox, where I show that a society that has existed forever with the abilities of ordinary humans throughout its history can't exist because they would have had the ability to create a logical contradiction. And I show that. And so we can have like, maybe an infinite past that exists. Surely there's something metaphysically suspicious about an infinite past if an eternal society with the ability of ordinary humans can actualize a logical contradiction. So there are some things you can make a priori. And it's like, is this completely a priori for us? Well, no, because we know that there's time exists. How do we know that time exists? Empirical evidence. And one of my other papers, I produced something called naturalistic mental states theorem that shows that mental states are effectively epiphenomenal. Is it completely a priori? Well, in a sense, yeah, there's mathematics involved, and that's all a priori. But how do we know the model applies to the universe? Well, how do we know there's things like physical laws, physical conditions, physical? It was like, well, empirical observation. So a lot of these a priori evidence are linked to the empirical world. Yeah, it's a little bit tenuous, and maybe it's just empirical evidence that everybody already knows about. We haven't need to do that much scientific research for it, but it's still empirical to a significant degree, enough to allow us to make conclusions about reality.
Yeah. Now, the guy in this video here, I believe, is Sean Carroll, who is a physicist, and another physicist who unfortunately doesn't seem to have had very good training in philosophy, especially considering what he says about it. I actually think I watched his debate with William Lane Craig live, and I actually thought he was one of Dr. Craig's better opponents, even though some members of the Christian Apologetics Alliance disagreed with me and thought his performance is pretty bad. I actually kind of like Sean Carroll in that debate, but yeah, I mean, Maverick Christian was pointing out some of the flaws in his thinking, but there are also some other things too that you have to accept before you can even do science. Science used to be known as natural philosophy because science was subservient to philosophy. You have to have certain philosophical assumptions before you can even do science. You have to, for example, assume that my senses give me accurate information. There's no way I can prove that they do. We often hear epistemologists talk about that we could be a brain in a vat with a mad scientist and sending electrical impulses to where we imagine that we're in the external universe, but we're really not. We could be in the Matrix, for example, or any of these kinds of things. So you have to assume that your senses are relaying correct information. You can't prove it, but you have to assume it before you can even do science. And so you have to have that philosophical foundation there, and certain other things that science can't prove. that, for example, science can't prove the scientific method because that would be circular. You're using science to prove science, essentially. So you have to use philosophy to prove that the scientific method is a reliable way to learn information. So it just seems like this whole idea that a priori, arguments don't relay reliable information is just very, very short-sighted, and it also kind of misunderstands the whole purpose of a logical argument. If you have a deductive argument where you have two premises that lead to a conclusion, then if your two premises are true, your conclusion necessarily follows. There's no two ways about it. So even if your argument is a priori, where you're arguing before you have any real evidence for it, if your argument is sound, then your argument is relaying true and correct information.
It's really unfortunate we don't have the context to see what argument John Carroll is referring to. We might be able to see more about it.
Right.
That's the great thing about many of these flawless atheist victories is, without context, how do you know if it's a victory or not?
Exactly, yeah.
It may be a small victory, but you can win the battle and lose the war.
Yeah, or it could be complete nonsense.
Precisely. Well, we've got one left. Let's hope
it better be a doozy.
I know, right? To make this video worth watching. So let's see here. You guys covered that last one way better than I would have. So I'm just going to let the listeners leave it at that.
Hey, Dawkins, I believe in Jesus or whatever God they decide, and I felt the presence of the Lord. I have had that personal experience in a way that whatever you say with fancy Darwin talk, I have felt it the way I felt this chair.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I'm not impressed by that because there are a similar number of people who are who brought up Hindus and say I felt the presence of Lord Krishna and etc. I mean, there are all sorts of illusions that the human brain is very capable of creating, and
that's an illusion. Those people those people deluded? Those people that say they have had a religious experience?
I think they are. Yes.
Those people who say that we have experienced a miracle, that God has interceded in the world.
Yes, most definitely.
That's a delusion.
Yes.
The notion that raising Lazarus from the dead.
Oh, of course. I mean, that kind of story happens so easily. It happens to this day. There are all sorts of people reporting miracles all the time, and we don't. You don't believe them because it doesn't happen to chime in with the religion in which you were brought up.
Many people have criticized you, and when they read the God delusion, for example, you talk about the Jewish God, and you say genocidal, homophobic, racist. You use very provocative terms.
Well, that's the Abrahamic God, which is the God of the Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Yes.
Yeah, you are absolutely provocative on your descriptions.
Read Leviticus, read Deuteronomy. I don't need to do any more than just quote.
But is that a caricature to take the worst or the most fundamentalist, literalist readings of it, as opposed to the thousands of years of evolution of all of those religions?
Two things to say about that. One is that there are many people in this world who do take the Bible or the Quran literally, and literally do think that you should stone homosexuals to death or whatever it might be. That's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is that even those people who don't say that, those people who have, as you say, evolved, have moved on. They have moved on for secular reasons. We've now abolished slavery. We now give equal rights to women. We now give votes to women. That's nothing to do with Scripture. That's nothing to do with the Bible. That's come about in spite of the Bible. And people have now gone back to the Bible and said, "Oh, well, we'll leave out that bit. We'll leave out that bit."
Although some would say the abolishment of slavery was very much inspired by the Bible, even though slavery might have been the same.
Well, you've got to be joking because what you're saying is that you can, if you look through the Bible, pick a verse. You can probably find a verse that you can read as abolishing slavery, and then you've got another verse that says you should keep slaves. So you're picking and choosing. That's all I'm saying. We don't get our morals from the Bible because we pick and choose on the basis of a modern morality which has evolved. You're quite right to say it's evolved. It's evolved for secular reasons, and now with hindsight, having evolved our morality for secular reasons, we can go back to the Bible and we can, as it were, rub out the bits that don't fit with our modern secular morality. Just don't read them anymore, and that's what people do.
All right, so let's tackle his things with religious experience. in a way, he has a good point in that religious experience is just like a terrible argument, because it's like, here's my experience, and it's like, well, that's not my experience. And yeah, but where religious experience becomes valuably epistemically is the person actually having the religious experience. For them, that experience is justified. So I'm reminded where William James, he's a philosopher who talks about religious experience, and he believed that for the person who has that, mystical experiential state, when well developed, provides some justification. And he says, I'm quoting here, there our own more rational beliefs are based on evidence exactly similar in nature to that which mystics quote for theirs. Our senses, namely, have assured us of certain states of fact, but mystical experiences are direct perceptions of fact for those who have them, as any sensations ever were for us. So if it's true that these people, for example, have genuine experiences of God, well, then it does provide some justification and warrant for that person. Now, if a person isn't experiencing that themselves, then yeah, it's not really much evidence for them and really wouldn't constitute an argument. But I mean, what Plantinga points out is that, if this stuff is true, then probably Christians are justified for their belief. And I think that works out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know if I have much to say here. I mean, I would disagree with Dawkins about how he says you pick and choose from the Bible. You have to read the Bible in its entire context. And so Christians don't pick or choose. It's just that some Christians are really bad at interpreting Scripture and others are really good at it. So, the Bible itself has no real. I mean, like abortion. The Bible really has no specific, unequivocal condemnation of slavery, just like it doesn't of abortion. But you have to take all of the scriptures in the overall context of the historical context that the books were written in, and also of the context of the passage with the surrounding chapter or the surrounding book. Plus, you have to take it in the overall context of Scripture itself, because we do have passages, for example, in Exodus or Leviticus, which says, if you capture someone to sell them into slavery, you shall be put to death. And so obviously Scripture condemns selling people into slavery. Paul wrote to Onesimus that, I'm sending your slave back to you, receive him as a brother, not as a slave. So, and then we have other verses where Paul wrote, in Christ there's no slave, no free, no Jew, no Gentile, that kind of thing. So we do have verses which show that, slavery is wrong. But, then an atheist can look at the book of Leviticus and say, well, look, we have passages here that say, excuse me, that say that slaves, should be treated as property and that kind of thing. And so, just like what the pro-choice Christians and atheists do when they talk about abortion, is they don't take these passages in the overall context that these books are written in. And so they don't really understand, Scripture's teaching as a whole on human value and how slavery and abortion and these kinds of things are wrong, because they just pinpoint they just pinpoint specific verses which they think supports their point of view. So ironically, it's the atheist, not the Christian, who's actually picking and choosing what they want to believe from the Bible.
Well, I think some Christians pick and choose what they want to believe in the Bible. I believe happens at least some of the times.
Well, they do. Like I said, some Christians are really bad at interpreting Scripture, so, no doubt. But overall, if you look at Scripture with the proper hermeneutical techniques, you're much more likely to come out of it with a proper interpretation of it. And it's not something that we should do. And most Christians, I think, rightly condemn picking and choosing what you want to believe out of the Bible, because there is a difference between a committed believer and a more nominal believer, someone who only goes to church once or twice a year, someone who doesn't read their Bible or pray constantly, that kind of thing.
What I think is sometimes overlooked is that what Jesus once said, Moses gave you for that law regarding divorce because you're so hard to teach, because your hearts are so hard. But listen to the law I'm giving you now. And if you look closely, you can actually see the seeds for undoing slavery in the New Testament, in Jesus' own words. It's sort of subtle, But he says, take this commandment right now that love your neighbor as yourself. Now, that is the central command. He says this is like, apart from like, loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind, love your neighbor as yourself. This is the most important commandment. And we have to recognize possibly that some of these other rules and restrictions were given at the time so that, okay, this is because you're so hard to teach. Here are the rules we're giving you now. But just apply logic and reason to love your neighbor as yourself. What do you get? Well, you wouldn't get slavery.
Right.
You wouldn't get like a harsh treatment of women. You wouldn't get discrimination. You wouldn't get this prejudice and other type of nonsense. And you have to recognize that when you really think about it, even as the Christian church, we're nowhere near following this ideal of love your neighbor as yourself, the second commandment. So I think we still have a lot of moral progress to do. Like, even if you 1,000 years from now, it's like, why didn't you guys recognize that this was wrong? Why did Christians never recognize this? It's like, well, I mean, the seed was there all along. We just don't okay, to give an example, suppose, for example, I have $2,000 or something, and I buy myself big fancy TV screen. I could instead donate that money to feed the hungry, feed starving children, or something like that. Do I do that? No, I'll probably buy the big screen TV or buy a new camera or something like that. And if I really honest with myself, am I doing am I following that ideal? It's like, I'm not really doing that right now. None of us are. And if you 2,000 years ago, maybe some of them recognized that, yeah, slavery does kind of suck, but this is how our economy works. We don't want to give up on it. And just like we're at right now, we don't want to give up on our little material possessions, our own little private sins. And so it's not that it was never there. It was there. It was the seed of it there. It just didn't really fully germinate then yet. And, it is true that you can take the Bible part and pick apart different ways. But if you really go to the heart of the matter, the heart of Christianity, the heart of how we are to treat our fellow human beings, that's always been there and is there right now. And even now, we're still not fully realizing that ideal.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's well said. I think you guys put it together very well on that one. And the only thing I'm going to add to that is Dawkins also commits the genetic fallacy here, in that he's saying that, well, just because you grew up in this religion, this is what you are. However, just because someone grows up in a particular religion, that has no bearing on the individual possible truth of a given belief system. So, that's this last clip, ironically, packs a lot of stuff into this last short segment. So, and, clearly it was spliced up pieces of the interview as well.
Right.
So I think it's really also trying to just run you over with, here's reasons not to believe religion. Here's reasons not to believe religion. Here's reasons not to believe religion. Here's why Christianity is wrong. Here's why Christianity is wrong. It's just running us over. It's steamrolling us with reasons that aren't all that great, as you gentlemen have kind of pointed out. Is there are problems with these things, and I think for somebody to have an honest assessment of any religion, not just Christianity, but any religion, you have to look at that view internally to a certain extent. In any religion or viewpoint I try and study, I try and get in the mindset of a believer as much as possible. I try and listen to people who are teaching in that religion so that I can understand the internal consistencies and the internal inconsistencies. I have yet to run into one that has quite the internal consistency that Christianity does. Not to say it's not out there, but in the major ones I've looked at, it's really hard to find something when you look at the actual teachings of what people actually understand that as, to find one that's as consistent as Christianity in terms of its moral teaching, its central message of truth and salvation through just Jesus Christ, and no other way. So you know, that's just a few of my thoughts on this last video. There's a lot packed in there in those few seconds. We could probably watch that whole interview and pick it apart, but I think we hit on some of the major points.
Yeah.
All right. So on a scale of 1 to 10 of winning you over from Christianity to atheism, with 1 being I am absolutely not moved at all any closer, and 10 being, you know what, I'm going to wake up an atheist tomorrow. Where do you guys find yourself on the atheist flawless victories?
I guess I put myself at a 1.5, but I was like, I'm watching this video. It's like, is this intended to convert anybody to atheism? There's really many arguments. I mean, it seems to me more like, here are some things that people who happen to be atheists said some cool stuff, even if there's like almost no argument or evidence whatsoever. I mean, the closest thing we can get to that is like, you know, Dawkins saying, you know, there are a lot of religions out there, which I guess that's something of an argument. Or you'd say like, you know, people pick and choose with the Bible. It's like, yeah, okay, even if that's true, that doesn't come close to showing that atheism is true. And maybe it attacks biblical inerrancy or something, but even you don't even need to be biblical inerrant to be a Christian. There are Christians who don't accept biblical inerrancy.
Yeah,
that doesn't really do anything to attack the evidence that Jesus rose from the dead, for example, or that God doesn't exist. I mean, there's lots of evidence that God exists that doesn't rely on the Bible at all.
Right. Yeah, I'd say on that scale, I'm probably a firm -7.
Fair enough.
I would say it probably made me a little bit more of a committed Christian.
Fair enough. I'm gonna put myself at a 1 just because I set the rules for the scale, and right. you violated the rules of the scale, Clinton. So I can't accept that.
Oh.
Yes. You're the only one who's wrong.
Right. Okay, I'll put myself at a 1.
There you go. That's better.
Now, to be fair to this video, it's labeled the 7 clever atheist flawless victories, on a scale of 1 being not clever at all, and 10 being the most incredibly clever thing I've ever heard. Where would you rate the cleverness of these remarks?
Would I rate anything clever? Nothing really comes to mind. I mean, a lot of these are hackneyed stuff that atheists have been saying. Like, there's so many religions out there. It's like, well, that's not really clever. That's very unoriginal. People have been saying that for a long time.
Right.
It's clever. Maybe there's something clever that I missed. I don't know. I can't think of anything that's particularly clever. They said.
Yeah, I might go with a 2 on that scale, and that's just for Christopher Hitchens, who was known for his rhetoric. But yeah, there wasn't really anything there I'd really consider clever.
I'm going to be extremely fair here because I think they picked some decent speakers out for this. They just picked really bad clips of them for the most part. So I'm going to be very fair and give it a 3. A very hesitant 3, but still a 3.
I feel I have to get at least a 2 because they have people with British accents, and that just automatically makes them more clever.
Right. Yeah.
That's true. Maybe we need to break it down by how many British accents were in there and divide the cleverness score by that, and then multiply by the exponent or something along those lines.
I give him at least 2 because Christopher Hitchens, even if he didn't have much of a substantive argument, rhetorically he was pretty clever. I like what he said rhetorically. He's like, that's good. Rhetorically, it's good.
Yeah.
Even out of context.
Yeah, right.
All right. So that's been our show for tonight. So any shout outs from you guys as to other materials our listeners should check out? I know we've done a few throughout the show, but this is the time to go ahead and plug your website, your YouTube. Let's start with you, Maverick.
All right. Yeah, I got a YouTube channel. I have a blog, maverickchristian.org. I have a Patreon who said his price is way too cheap, apparently. But yeah, that's what I got.
All right. Well, I'm affiliated with Life Training Institute. You can find that website at www.prolifetraining.com. And if you go to the blog on the website, I'm the one who primarily posts to that blog. So you can check out my material there. I also have a lot of material on the Secular Pro-Life blog, which you can find at blog.secularprolife.org. And then I do have a YouTube channel, and I have posted a few videos, but I don't update it very often, and I don't get nearly as creative as most YouTube vloggers do. I don't have an intro video, and I don't have incredibly good $1,000 equipment or anything, but I've posted some videos, and I will probably post there again in the future. I actually have some ideas for some videos I'd like to. I guess I could plug this too. I actually have some ideas for videos I would like to do in the future. And when I finally get the right necessary equipment for that, they'll go on my YouTube channel. So you can just, search out my name on YouTube and find me there.
All right. Excellent. And of course, I mentioned this earlier in the show. I also run a page called Question Christianity. So you can check that out on YouTube or Facebook. But together collectively, we work here and produce content on the Mentionables channel. Hit subscribe, hit the little bell so you can get notified next time that we go live like this. We certainly appreciate the support either on our individual channels or here on the collective channel. It's very appreciated. So, hit that subscribe and share with some friends. All right, gentlemen. Well, it's been good. I'm going to play our outro, and we're going to roll on out.
It's been real. It's been fun. Oh, okay. I'm off.
That's okay. I can bring you back. I have that power.
No, I was just going to make it. I was just going to make a dumb joke. I was going to say, it's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. Nothing worth bringing me back on for.
Well, there's the bonus clip for the night.
Okay, there we go.